Welcome to NETIV. Um, Tonight, I really have no title. I think what I want to talk about, I just put together this afternoon. I thought about it last night. In fact, I got up in the middle of the night twice in order to deal with what I was thinking about. So I wrote, and then kept going back to bed and getting up and coming back and writing some more. So the article is not exactly what you call polished, but at the same point in time, it gets to the understanding what I'm seeing happening points to the end of days. And to go to the end in mind, um, I don't know how many of you have a Humash. This is the Humash. This is the five books of the Torah with their commentary. Well, the commentaries are all pretty much the same thing. They give you at the end, they tell you how many verses there are in the text. There was one book, the book called Me Chetz, Chetz meaning the end. So at the end, that's one of the sections in here. They not only tell you how many verses there are, they tell you how many words there are. Now, what's interesting about that is the fact it's the only one that does that. No other text, no other parsha gives you the number of words in it. So I asked myself, what do you think? This is what I've come up with. The number of words in this section, which is at the end, that's what it's called, maquettes, has 2,025 words. 2,025 words. Time out. Why 2,025? Is there a hint in there of something? If the beginning talks about the end and the end talks about the number of words, should I put them together to get an idea? Well, I did. And my idea is that at the end of 2025, something magical is going to happen. I shouldn't call it magical, should I? Well, let me tell you this. I'm already out of my notes and I'm going off my head, so you're going to have to catch up as we go along. The Hebrew calendar is basically 12 months, right? It's a lunar calendar. Being a lunar calendar, it's based upon 28 days cycling. And every 19-year period, they have to have 5 course corrections. 5 extra months have to be added to the calendar in order to keep the holidays occurring in the season that they were intended to occur at. So for Passover is to occur in the month of Nisan, which is in the spring, the first month. So therefore, they have to, after 3, possibly the 4th year, they have to add a month, a second month of Adar, in order to fit it together. Now that sounds crazy to us, but if you lived in Asia, and let me pick on China, I'll give you some more of this next week because I'll go back to my planned lesson. This is not the planned lesson. China has a 12-month calendar, same basis as the Hebrew calendar. And if I walk all the way across Asia, excluding the European Asians, the Russians, the Ukrainians, those, all of them have a 12-month lunar calendar. All of them. China, Japan, and a couple of the others also have in their place an extra month so that they can take that lunar calendar and make it match up with the solar calendar. So everything comes out the same. So we have this calendar, 12 months, and this calendar seems to have, well, interesting things that make sense to me. But again, I've been watching it and looking at it and trying to come to some understanding. And in doing so, I found that it makes more sense if we look at not only that calendar, but our own in the sense of years. Remember, the sun and rules the day, the moon rules the night. The moon helps us to create the time, the 24-hour period, but the sun really gives us a rotation and a monthly cycle that we hang on that's not really based on any particular thing. The Hebrew calendar, at least it's every 28 days. In the Gentile calendar, we can have months of 28 days, but we most often will have months of 30 days or 31 days in order to make it work out. And then we still have to have an extra day. So as I'm going through my notes and I was beginning to look at this, I was beginning to understand we live in a world where people, well, there's an international difference in the way we see time. And that international difference makes a huge difference. I don't know if you understood the Chinese calendar, and I'll take that one because the Chinese calendar has 12 animals marking each of the months. But did you know that those 12 animals are also found in the Hebrew Bible and are the most identified in the Hebrew Bible? And next week, I hope to go through and basically lay out to you how their calendar looks and why those months are significant. But I want to talk about, well, I want to talk to you about how the months themselves are going to show up. Let me read to you from the Talmud. This is out of Bava Batra 74b. And God created the great sea monsters. He created, and that's in Genesis chapter 1, verse 21. Well, what sea monster did God create? And according to our Bible, it just simply says great sea monsters. But if you go to the Hebrew Bible, it says Leviathan. Leviathan. So Leviathan is the monster that it sees. Here in Babylonia, they interpreted this as a reference to the sea oryx. Rabbi Yohanan said, this is the Leviathan, the slant serpent, and Leviathan, the tortoise serpent. There were two Leviathans created in the beginning. Remember, God created two of everything. One male, one female. There was no alternative. The Democrats can say there was, but there's not. They're either male or they're female. That's the way it works. And as he goes through this, he identified them as being different, just like males and females are different. As it stated, in that day, the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the slant serpent, and Leviathan, the torturous serpent. Now, Isaiah chapter 45, 15 and 16 deal with specifically the Leviathan. Leviathan, as you would probably call, would be a great sea monster. He would be not a fire-breathing dragon. He'd be something very ominous. If you still believed or followed the Christian Bible, if you go to the book of Revelations, that monster mentioned in there is a Leviathan. That's what it would be like. The Gematria proposes or provides a mnemonic for the following statements of Rab Yehuva, citing the Rav. Everything, time, Jordan, Rav Yehuda says that Rav says everything that the Holy One, blessed be he, created in his world, he created male and female, even Leviathan, the slanted serpent, and Leviathan, the torturous serpent. Now he created male and female, and if they had coupled and produced offspring, they would have destroyed the entire world. So what did the Holy One do? Blessed be he. He castrated the male and he killed the female and salted her away to preserve her for a banquet for the righteous at the end of the days. as it is stated, and he will slay a serpent that is in the sea. Isaiah 27:1. So there, we're going to talk about two serpents. If you had a Chinese calendar, you have what they call a serpent month and a dragon month, one right after the other. Right now, you and I are in the serpent month. Soon, we will be in what they call the serpent year. Soon, we will be in the dragon year. And that's when you get to see all the costumes. But my point is that there's a serpent and there's a dragon. Now, if I go back to the Tanakh or the Torah, and I go to the first chapter, and I was talking with my wife a little bit about this earlier. In Genesis chapter 1, we find God does something very interesting very early. In the beginning of in the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth, when the earth was astonishingly empty, with darkness upon the face of the deep, and a divine presence hovering upon the surface of the waters. And then God said, "Let there be light." In the beginning, God had already established evil. Evil should be understood. The synonym for it would have been darkness, Hoshech. God brought darkness early. Why? Because free will requires it. If you don't have evil, there's no need to worry about a choice. Evil comes because of choice. So the first things he does is he creates evil. He creates darkness. Later, same day, he creates light. Opposite of that. If we go down in that same chapter to about verse 21, we begin to see again, 21 says in 1, and God created the great sea giants and that every living thing being that creeps, to which the waters teemed after their kinds, and all winged fowl and every kind. And God saw that it was good. Well, if you go to that word sea giants, you come to the word Leviathan. Leviathan is the example of evil. It's also going to be the example of good. But it's a dragon, it's a sea monster. Now, when you go to chapter 3, we run into another monster. That monster in chapter 3 creates for us what we have in the world today. So as you're looking at that chapter, the first thing you should notice is that what you're going to be looking at is a Nahash, a Nahash, a serpent, a dragon. An animal, maybe. There's a lot of discussion as to whether it's an animal or not. In fact, many people think that it's not even an animal at all, but it was actually an angel that God had created for this one purpose. Because of several things. Number one, it had legs and arms. Snakes don't have legs and arms, but if you look at the skeletal system, you'll find that there are nubs where arms and legs would be if the serpent or the snake actually could stand up, but there's not enough of it there to hold the animal up. The second thing that we find is if you're looking at chapter 3, you find out that he was cunning, smarter than the rest of the animals. And not only that, he could speak, he could converse. In other words, he could interpret and create a relationship, which he did with Eve. The question is, why did he choose to make the action with Eve? The word for Nahash, serpent, has another meaning. It also refers to the energy that the serpent produced, called Haviyah. Havia. Havia, if I change the vowels, I have the word hava. The snake, the serpent, is the same persuasive being as a woman. And he chooses to go, or she chooses to go, because it's never told whether it has a male or female sex, but it does. Yah, hey, is feminine. So the serpent convinces Eve to violate the rules. He doesn't try to convince Adam, only Eve. Eve and then begins to talk to her husband, identifying for him that she's already tasted the apple and it's good. Well, it's not even an apple. We're not even sure what it was. Some would say it's a fruit. Some would say it's wheat, a grain. I'm not sure that I would be satisfied and excited to eat wheat raw, but that's what they were thinking. Grain I could go with. Well, not grain, but grapes. Well, in the story, as I'm going through it, I'm beginning to sense the fact that the serpent chose Eve to go girl to girl. Now that she's been convinced, it's not hard to convince Adam. Adam may have had the good idea that I'm going to go there and I'm going to save her and I'm going to eat the fruit and therefore that'll save her. Or he might have been thinking, oh, I've already lost one partner. That's if you buy that Lilith was actually his real first wife, which according to the book of Webster's dictionary, she was his first wife. And she left him because of her independence. You can look it up in the dictionary, Lilith, Lilith. Oh, by the way, her name means darkness. Because remember, what was the first thing that was created in terms of, well, the universe was darkness. When I sign off, I might tell you, Lila Tov, good night. If I were Samson, I would have found myself finding the night after telling my mate about my secret of hair. Because you see, Delilah means darkness. So Samson was sleeping with darkness. He was sleeping with evil. Our story really hinges on the understanding that there's a lot of things going on in this world that are dark. And that darkness is there on purpose. God has established it there. God wants us to deal with it in order to find ourselves moving up. And were the Holy One, blessed be he, not assisting Gabriel, he would have not been able to hunt, as it says, only he who made him can use his sword to approach him. Who's him? Yeah. Rav Dimi came to Eretz Israel from Babylon, or came from Israel to Babylon, and he said to Rabbi Yohanan, when the Leviathan is hungry, he produces breath from his mouth and thereby boils all the waters in the sea, depths of the sea. And he makes the deep boil like a pot. And that's actually found in Job chapter 41. And if Leviathan did not place his head into the Garden of Eden, no creature could withstand his foul smell. As it is stated, he makes the sea like a seething mixture, a Merkabah. Again, Job 41, chapter 41, verse 23. And the term Merkabah is also used to describe something with a smell. Exodus 30, verse 25. I'm reading again out of the Talmud, again out of Bava Batra. And when he he is thirsty. He makes many furrows in the sea, as it is said. He makes paths to the shine after him. Rab Hava Bar Yochav says, after the Leviathan drinks from the sea, the depths of the sea does not return to its normal condition until 70 years have passed, as it said. One would think the deep is a hoary, well, according to Job 41:24, and the hoary indicates that a person who is no less than 70 years old. But Rabbah says that the Rabbi Yohanan saw in the future that the Holy One, blessed be he, will make a feast out of the righteous, or for the righteous, from the flesh of the Leviathan, as it is said, the Habirim, which are the righteous, will feast on the Hru, which is the animal. And Kara means nothing other than the feast itself. So God is going to eventually kill evil, eventually, but not yet. You see, we all have to face these struggles. We all have to lift ourselves up. We can use the help of others. We can spend our time in prayer. We can spend our time reading. We can gain access to goodness in many ways, prayer being one of them. So here we go. We've got a situation where God is established for us a system. The system is based on good and evil. God built the evil, then he built the good. Now he knew that the evil was going to be later slain, but man had to have choice. Man had to move forward. He couldn't go backwards. And so that's where we find ourselves at this point in time, moving forward. Now, as we go through this, one of the things I want you to understand is in the book of Psalms, Leviathan is even in the book of Psalms. It's in Psalm 104:24-26, where it says God was sporting with the Leviathan, creating them, but destroying the partner. How great are your works, O Lord! You have made them all with good wisdom, and the earth is full of your possessions. The sea giant, the Leviathan, and wide there are creeping things, and innumerable beasts, both small and great. There the ships go. You formed the Leviathan with which you sport. Leviathan is a sport. The world that we are in now is the world of the dragon. The world that we will go into, if we follow the Chinese calendar, is the world of the snake. We all know that the snake is yucky. My wife will tell me that. My wife spends her time when we're outside, since we're in Texas. We have 4 different kinds of poisonous snakes here, which is not bad, except that I don't recognize any of them easily. In fact, I haven't seen any since I've been here. But according to our neighborhood chat, there are snakes around and they've been all over the place. So eventually I'm sure I'm going to get to see them. Now, you and I both, well, I should put it this way. We probably don't like snakes. We probably have a fear of snakes because you don't know whether the snake is poisonous or whether it's good. But the understanding is the fact that they have function. Now, in the course of time, one of the things that's happening is the fact that the snake has made its appearance on lots of things. In fact, a couple of years ago, I taught the fact that there was going to be not 12 signs of the zodiac, but there would be 13. I don't know how many of you remember when I taught that lesson. But because of the tilt of the earth, because of all of the things that are happening, there's actually 80 some constellations that we follow. We have 12 of them that we recognize, and that makes up the zodiac. And those 12 follow what's called the path of the ecliptic, where they simply spin around the sun following a specific path. Well, there's actually 13. And that 13 is soon to become truly apart. In fact, if you between November 30th and December 18th, it's the most prominent constellation in the night sky. It's called Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus was a serpent bearer. It's a long serpent, like a dragon, if you will, stretches across the horizon. Ophiuchus was the man holding this serpent, this snake. And he appears at the end of what we would call the normal calendar, late July or late December. And that's when he appears in the night sky. And he's going to be there all the time. Now, as we go through this, I want you to understand that the serpent or the snake is common to almost all cultures, all religions. In fact, Egypt, we know Egypt had the cobra. That was their big snake. The Greeks, they had another one that was called Osilius, and it was actually a god. Had to let somebody in. It was actually a god. In fact, its purpose was prophecy and healing. Oh, wait a second. If I go to the book of Genesis and I go to chapter 41, the Egyptian Pharaoh changed the name of Joseph. Do you remember? What was Joseph's new name? He only had it once. Revealer of secrets, a prophet, a special understanding for just him. Hinduism has snakes, powerful divine snakes that are responsible for fertilization and for uh, what's the other thing I want? Um, protection. The American Indians had snakes. How many different animals and how many different nations have snakes as part of their system? The Norse had it. Lots of them have it. In our case, most of us think of the snake as something that is responsible for temptation and knowledge. But it's also going to be responsible for things which we call Yetzer Hara. You see, it helps to influence our evil inclination if we let it. It forces us to make challenges. It's also responsible for what we call ego. It's also responsible for separation. The illusion of a self, well, it has all of these evil possibilities, but the greatest possibility it has is potential for redemption. You see, that's what God intended it to bring. Certainly there's evil in the world, so we make choices, but the answer is the reason we make choices is to redeem ourselves, to make ourselves correct. I found it rather interesting as I was going through. I originally was doing a study on AI, and I talked with some friends on Sunday, and I want to mention it again tonight. AI is going to be part of our lives. You can't get away from it. Uh, all of the major players are involved in it. AI is technology. Now, the Hebrew or the Greek word for technology is techne. The Hebrew word for technology is tikkun, redemption. The computer can do one of two things for us. It can take us down or take us up. That's our choice as to what happens. Now, Moses was one of those characters who understood that. You remember what was the first thing that Moses had a hold of when he was talking with God at the mountain? Pick up that stick. What was the stick? It was a serpent. He took that stick and he moved on and used it on the first of the miracles. When they were in the wilderness, remember what happened? People began to die. And why were they dying? because of their actions. What did God do? He had Moses make a serpent, a point of healing, a medicine. God not only takes what is evil, but he also makes it good. And that's what's going on. Evil tempts us to do things. The Nahash normally is thought of as something that causes us to reject God, to move away from God. It introduces us to doubt, to thinking there's two possibilities when we know there's really only one. But it's also for healing. It's there for redemption. In Numbers chapter 21, Moses uses the stick to create the copper serpent. Now, the copper serpent is the Hebrew understanding. Asilius is the Greek understanding. Do you remember where you see the Asilius? Two serpents on a rod, sign in a medical institute. Constantly using the understanding. In the last days, we are moving towards this period of time when all of this is going to happen, when God is going to use things. Now, in the case of Saul, or of Saul, uh, who did I say I was talking about tonight? Not Shem,
Samson.
Samson. Thank you very much. Samson. I want you to turn in your Bibles back to the first chapter of first chapter of Samuel. Now, Samson appears in the book of Judges. Samson is the hero. Samson is there to save the Jewish people. He has an interesting way of doing it. But Samson was also there for something else. And we're going to get to that because that's significant in understanding. Now I lost my notes. Not again. See what happens when my wife was in, I put my wife in charge of my secretarial work. I screwed up. But in the book, sorry, I'm sorry. It's not your fault. I should have got up and punched the keys myself instead. In the book of Samuel, First Samuel, yeah, wrong paper. Here it is. Here we go. How do I want to say this? Well, just let me tell you. In the book of Samuel, Saul, or Samson, had a father. What was his father's name? Yahai. In English, we say it's Jesse, but that doesn't really work, but it's the best we come up with. Anyway, in the course of time, remember, the Talmud tells us that Jesse was perfect, never sinned, not at all. In fact, he would never have died had it not been for the serpent. The serpent is what killed him, because all of us have to go through death. That's the important thing. I know what it is. Turn to 2 Samuel 17. 2 Samuel 17:25. It begins by saying, Absalom appointed Amas over the army in place of Joab. Amas was the son of a man named Ithra, the Israelite, who consorted with Abigail, who was the daughter of Nahash. Abigail is the daughter of Nahash. Now we know Nahash means serpent. So she is the daughter of the serpent. Now, if you got an art scroll or a Bible that has a message to it, you'll find out that Abigail was the daughter of Jesse. Jesse was called the serpent. Imagine that. A man who supposedly was perfect is identified as being a serpent. So a serpent can be both bad and it can also be good at the same time. It's not something that's stuck in one place or the other. The understanding then becomes that the serpent can be of good use. In in the book, well, it's actually not in our text, it's actually in the Zohar. Pincus, Phineas, whatever you want to call him, who was a heir now, he became a heir to the uh, high priesthood, killed Balaam. Now he killed Balaam. Balaam was undefeatable, except for one thing. Pincus made a sword, and he made the sword in the shape of a serpent. And according to Zohar, the third book, 194b, Balaam used that sword to kill Balaam. It was a snake. I started out by talking to you about the blue book, the Humash. And I told you that in the Humash, the thing that we're going to find is that in the section called Yaketz, Miketz, which is talking about the end. In that book, at the end of the chapter, it gives us the number of verses, but it gives us one thing that nobody else has. None of the other chapters have, and that's the number of pages, number of words. 2025. Now, 2025 is that Miketz happens to be the last week of December this coming fall or this coming year. We've already gone through it. It's called Hanukkah. Do you remember what happened at Hanukkah? Liberation. That's the same thing that's going to happen. I think there's going to be a liberation that's going to happen the last week of December 2025, the last possible instant. We're going to be drawing closer and closer to the end of days. Now, whether this is actually the end of days, I don't know, but it becomes close. I don't know if you understand, but every 12 years, we go through this cycle of years. And in the Chinese calendar, well, let me talk about the Chinese calendar. In the Chinese calendar, the month or the year of the snake happens every 12th year. Well, the snake is coming. It will be here. And when it's here, 12 years earlier was 2000, well, 2000 and no, I forgot. 12 years, 2025, 12 years is 2013. 2013 was a year of plague in the world. 12 years before that is 2001. 9/11 happened in 2001. 12 years in front of that, 1998, the year of the computer. Technology happened. As we go through understandings, things are pointing to the fact that we're reaching the end of all days. We've reached the point where everything now has finally cycled out. I believe that what President Trump is doing reminds me of what happens with Samson. Samson found himself opposed to everyone. He was the hero for Israel. He was their judge. But he had problems. He was perfect in the sense that he was a Nazarite. He didn't drink, was not allowed to be touching with wine. But at the same point in time, he found himself in love with foreigners. He never married a Jew. But then we find ourselves with something else that's entirely interesting. You see, according to the Arizal was the um, definer of what we call the reincarnation. And the Arizal said that Samson was here because he needed to do something special. What did he need to do that was special? Well, according to Genesis chapter 49, Jacob says that the reason that he was here was to fulfill one thing. In chapter 49, in verse number 16, it begins, it says, Dan will avenge his people. The tribes of Israel will be united as one. Dan will be like a serpent. Like a serpent, Dan will be. A serpent on the highway, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels so its rider falls backwards. For your salvation do I long, O Hashem. Samson was that one character and the only character that came from the tribe of Dan. But he also had something else going for him. You see, he was here to do something for someone else who couldn't do it for himself. According to the Arizal, he was responsible for taking care of the mistake made by Nadav and Abihu. Do you remember Nadav and Abihu? Those were the two sons of Aaron who went into the temple. Do you remember them? They went into the temple for the purposes of offering an offering. They weren't supposed to be there. Remember what happened to them? Fire went up their nose and killed them. Well, they did two things wrong, according to what I can understand from the Bible. One was they were never married. As a priest, you were supposed to be married, and they refused to get married because they didn't need one. Not only that, the second thing, according to the book of Leviticus, they had drank wine before they went in. They were what they might call drunk. I don't know. But then I look at the character called Samson. Samson was responsible for amending their mistakes. He didn't drink. He consorted with women. The only problem was it wasn't the right women, but he still did so. So our understanding is that he moved things forward, time forward. From that, we understand that there's something else that was happening at that point in time. He was responsible for, well, Ecclesiastes 10:11, which is found in the Zohar, says, will a snake bite without a whisper? That's the quote from Ecclesiastes. The Zohar says men know snakes, or it means no snake will bite a person unless whispered to by God. God is the protector of all things, us in particular. God made the angel of death, but God also made the serpent. But God also used the serpent for good as well as evil. We all have an opportunity to call on God, whisper, he will whisper to us. I'm going to quit now, but next week I won't have my notes taken care of by my wife. I'll have to do it myself. But we're going to look at calendars a little bit. We're going to understand what's going on. Please understand, Samson did what was wrong. And remember what happened. He died, pulled the temple down upon himself. But there was one time when he was trapped and they had him chained, and he grabbed those chains, and it's in the book of Judges. He grabbed those chains and he ripped the doors off the wall and he carried them to Hebron. Samson, the doors were 60 feet wide, actually 90 feet wide, 60 cubits wide. He carried 2 doors all the way to Hebron, which is on the opposite side of Israel. And in doing so, he pulled the doors apart. Now, 60 is an interesting number because you see that's the length of the temple. He pulled the temple doors off of the Philistine temple. He is going to be the one who will help us put the doors on the other temple, God's third temple. I have a friend in Israel who will soon be digging for the ashes of the red heifer again. I truly believe this time they're going to find something amazing and begin to put back together, if not the tabernacle, that material which will go into the temple. And I think all of this is going to start making sense at Hanukkah of this year. That's my hope. That's my thought.